It was supposed to be just another weekend getaway. The five of us, Sarah, Liam, Emily, Kyle, and I, needed a break from the relentless grind of college life. We decided to explore the old forest on the outskirts of town, a place rumored to be haunted. But we were young, adventurous, and skeptical. Ghost stories were just that, stories. We packed our tents, some food, and a lot of bravado, and set off on a sunny Friday afternoon. The forest was beautiful, a canopy of green that filtered the sunlight into soft, golden beams. Birds sang, and the air smelled of earth and pine. It was perfect. We hiked for hours, laughing and joking, until we stumbled upon it, a circle of ancient stones, half hidden by undergrowth. The stones were tall, weathered, and inscribed with strange symbols none of us could decipher. An eerie silence fell over our group as we approached, the forest seeming to hold its breath. "Guys, this is amazing!" Sarah exclaimed, her eyes wide with excitement. "It must be centuries old." Liam, ever the skeptic, scoffed. "Just some old rocks. Probably nothing." But Emily, with her love for the paranormal, disagreed. "This could be a druidic circle or something. It's so well preserved." I felt a chill despite the warm day. There was something unsettling about the stones, as if they were watching us. But I pushed the feeling aside. It was just an overactive imagination, right? We set up camp nearby, deciding to explore the circle further the next day. As night fell, we built a fire and sat around it, sharing ghost stories to pass the time. The forest seemed to close in on us, the trees casting long, twisted shadows. Around midnight, Emily suggested we perform a mock ritual in the stone circle. "Just for fun," she said, her eyes gleaming with mischief. Despite my reservations, peer pressure won out. We gathered around the central stone, holding hands and chanting nonsense words, our laughter echoing through the still night. And then, everything changed. A cold wind swept through the circle, extinguishing our fire. The ground beneath us trembled, and a low, guttural moan filled the air. The stones began to glow with an eerie, green light, casting grotesque shadows on our faces. Sarah screamed, pointing at the central stone. There, etched in glowing runes, was a figure, a woman with hollow eyes and a twisted smile. As we watched in horror, the figure began to move, stepping out of the stone as if it were a doorway. The witch stood before us, her eyes burning with rage. "Who dares disturb my slumber?" she hissed, her voice echoing in our heads. "You are marked, and for this trespass, you shall suffer." We turned to run, but it was too late. The witch raised her hands, and black marks appeared on our wrists, searing our flesh with unbearable pain. "You cannot escape me," she whispered, her voice chilling to the bone. "You will pay for your intrusion." Panic set in as we fled into the woods, the witch's laughter following us. Every shadow seemed to hide her twisted form, every rustle of leaves her approach. We were hunted, marked, and there was no escape. As we ran, I glanced back and saw Kyle trip, falling hard to the ground. Before I could turn back to help, the witch was upon him, her hands wrapping around his throat. His screams pierced the night, and then there was silence. We had awakened something ancient and vengeful, and now, one by one, we would face the witch's wrath. The marks on our wrists burned like brands, a constant reminder that we were no longer alone in these woods. And somewhere, in the darkness, the witch watched and waited, her hunt just beginning. We kept running, the terror of Kyle's screams pushing us forward. The forest, once enchanting, now felt like a twisted maze of shadows and unseen horrors. Every snapping twig made us jump, and every gust of wind carried the witch's malevolent whisper. "Keep moving," Liam shouted, his voice barely concealing his fear. "We have to find a way out." But it felt like the forest was working against us, paths we had traversed easily now twisted and unfamiliar. Sarah stumbled and fell, her ankle twisted painfully. Emily and I helped her up, our breath coming in ragged gasps. "We can't just keep running," Sarah panted, tears streaming down her face. "We need to find somewhere to hide, regroup." "There's an old cabin nearby," I said, remembering a broken down structure we had passed earlier. "It's not far. We can hide there." With Sarah leaning on us, we made our way to the cabin, each step heavy with dread. The witch's mark on our wrists throbbed with each beat of our hearts, a sinister reminder of our plight. The cabin was a dilapidated ruin, but it was shelter. We barricaded the door as best we could and huddled together in the darkness, the only light coming from the faint glow of our wrist marks. Liam paced back and forth, his face etched with anxiety. "We need a plan. We can't just sit here waiting to die." Emily, always the researcher, pulled out her phone, desperately searching for information. There has to be something about the stones, about the witch. Suddenly, a loud thud echoed through the cabin. We froze, our breath catching in our throats. The thud came again, louder this time, followed by a scraping sound. "She's here," Sarah whispered, her eyes wide with terror. The door shuddered as something heavy slammed against it. The witch's voice seeped through the cracks, a haunting melody that sent chills down our spines. Little mice, hiding in the dark. No escape, once you bear my mark." I grabbed a rusty old knife from a nearby shelf, my hands shaking. "We have to defend ourselves." Liam found a broken chair leg, and Emily clutched a heavy book. We stood in a circle, backs to each other, ready to face whatever came through the door. The door splintered, and with a final crash, it flew open. The witch stood in the doorway, her eyes glowing with a sickly green light. Her form was more solid now, more terrifying. She stepped into the cabin, her presence filling the room with an oppressive darkness. Liam charged at her, swinging the chair leg with all his might. The witch laughed, a sound that curdled our blood. She flicked her wrist, and Liam was thrown against the wall, his weapon shattering on impact. "Foolish children," she sneered, advancing on us. "You cannot fight me. You belong to me now." Sarah screamed and lunged at the witch with the knife, but it passed through her as if she were made of smoke. The witch's eyes locked onto mine, and I felt a cold hand close around my heart. "Your souls are mine," she whispered, her breath freezing the air. "And you will suffer for all eternity." Suddenly, Emily shouted, "I found something." She held up her phone, displaying an old text about the stone circle. "It says the witch can be banished if we destroy the central stone." The witch's eyes flashed with rage, and she turned towards Emily. "You will not," she began, but Liam tackled her, giving us a moment's reprieve. "Go," he shouted, struggling to hold the witch back. "Destroy the stone." We ran from the cabin, the witch's furious screams echoing behind us. The stone circle loomed ahead, its eerie glow lighting our way. We knew what we had to do, but fear gnawed at our resolve. As we reached the circle, the ground began to tremble, and the stones pulsed with a malevolent energy. Emily found a heavy rock and raised it above the central stone. "Do it," I urged, my voice shaking. "Before it's too late." With a cry, Emily brought the rock down. The stone shattered, and a blinding light engulfed us. The witch's scream of fury and pain filled the air, and then, silence. We collapsed to the ground, exhausted but alive. The marks on our wrists faded, leaving only faint scars. The witch was gone, banished back to whatever hell she had come from. But as we lay there, catching our breath, I couldn't shake the feeling that we hadn't seen the last of her. The forest seemed to whisper around us, and I knew, deep down, that our nightmare was far from over. Back in town, life seemed to return to normal, but we were forever changed. Liam and Sarah received medical attention for their injuries, and the rest of us tried to resume our daily routines. Yet, sleep was elusive, and nightmares plagued our nights. A week after the ordeal, Emily called for a meeting at my dorm. She had been researching incessantly, diving deep into old town records and occult texts. "I found something," she said, her eyes dark with exhaustion but alight with determination. "The witch we encountered wasn't just any spirit. She was once the most feared sorceress in this region. Her name was Alara." Sarah winced at the name, memories flooding back. "So what does that mean for us? We destroyed the stone, right?" Emily nodded. "Yes, but there's more. I found a reference to a ritual she performed before her death, a ritual to bind her spirit to the land. The book was a source of her power, but it wasn't the only anchor. There's something else, something we missed." Henry, who had stayed with us, leaned forward, his face grave. "What did you find?" "There's an old church at the edge of the forest," Emily continued. "It was built on the site where Alara was executed. The records say she cursed the land with her dying breath. If there's any place that could hold the key to breaking the curse for good, it's there." The thought of returning to the forest filled us with dread, but we knew we had no choice. The marks on our wrists had faded, but they had begun to ache again, a sinister reminder of Alara's lingering presence. We prepared for the journey, arming ourselves with whatever we could find, flashlights, ropes, and a couple of relics Emily had acquired from a local antique shop, items rumored to ward off evil spirits. The church was a crumbling ruin, half swallowed by the forest. Vines and moss covered its stone walls, and the air around it was heavy with an oppressive stillness. As we approached, the ground seemed to hum with an energy that made our skin crawl. Inside, the church was dark and cold. Broken pews and shattered stained glass lay scattered, remnants of a place long forgotten. At the far end, where the altar once stood, there was a large stone slab, covered in the same symbols we had seen at the stone circle. "This is it," Emily whispered. "This is where she was bound." We spread out, examining the area. Henry found a hidden compartment beneath the slab, containing a small, blackened box. It was old and intricately carved, much like the grimoire we had destroyed. "This must be the final anchor," he said, his voice barely audible. "We need to destroy it." But as we prepared to break the box, the temperature dropped sharply, and the shadows in the room seemed to come alive. A cold, hollow laughter echoed around us, and Alara's spectral form materialized, more menacing than ever. "Fools," she hissed. "Did you think you could destroy me so easily? My curse is eternal." She raised her hands, and the room was engulfed in a storm of dark energy. We were thrown back, our flashlights flickering and dying. The relics Emily had brought began to glow faintly, their light pushing back against the darkness. "Stay together," I shouted, grabbing the nearest relic. "We can't let her win." We formed a circle, holding the relics out in front of us. The light grew stronger, creating a barrier between us and the witch. She screamed in fury, her form distorting and flickering. "You cannot defeat me," she shrieked, her voice a cacophony of rage. "I am eternal." Emily stepped forward, the blackened box in her hands. "We can and we will," she said, her voice steady. "This ends now." With a determined cry, she hurled the box to the ground, smashing it into pieces. A blinding light erupted from the shards, enveloping Alara in its glow. Her screams of anger turned to cries of pain as she was consumed by the light, her form disintegrating into nothingness. The light faded, and silence fell over the church. The oppressive energy lifted, replaced by a peaceful stillness. We had done it. We had destroyed the source of her power. But the cost had been high. Liam and Sarah were hurt, and we were all scarred, physically and mentally, by the ordeal. As we helped each other out of the pit and back to the clearing, the weight of what we had faced settled heavily on our shoulders. Henry stood with us, his expression a mix of relief and sadness. "You did well," he said, his voice hoarse. "But remember, darkness like hers never truly dies. It lingers, waiting for the unwary." We nodded, understanding the gravity of his words. We had won the battle, but the war against such evil was never truly over. As we made our way back to the town, the sun rising to greet us, we knew that our lives would never be the same. The marks on our wrists had faded, but the memories of the witch's curse would haunt us forever. And somewhere, in the depths of the forest, the remnants of her dark power still lingered, waiting for the next unfortunate soul to stumble upon them. We tried to move on with our lives after destroying the final anchor, believing the witch's curse was finally broken. The days turned into weeks, and the oppressive memories of that night in the forest began to fade. But the unease lingered, a shadow that never fully dissipated. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the town, we received an urgent call from Henry. He had been investigating further, driven by a relentless need to ensure Alara's power was truly extinguished. "There's something I missed," he said, his voice trembling. "You need to come to my house. Now." We hurried to Henry's house, fear gnawing at our insides. His small cottage on the edge of town was filled with old books and occult artifacts. Henry's face was pale, his eyes wide with a mix of terror and determination. "What's going on?" Sarah asked, her voice shaky. Henry handed us an ancient manuscript, the pages brittle and yellowed with age. "This manuscript details Alara's curse. It speaks of a final, hidden anchor, something not of this world. It's her true source of power, something we haven't destroyed." My heart sank. "But we destroyed the grimoire and the box. What more could there be?" Henry pointed to a passage in the manuscript. "Her soul is bound to an object not on this plane. It resides in the astral realm, a place where only the strongest of spirits can reach. If we don't find it and destroy it, she will return, more powerful than ever." Liam shook his head in disbelief. "How do we even begin to do that?" "There's a ritual," Henry said. "One that can open a portal to the astral realm. But it's dangerous. We could be trapped there forever if we're not careful." Despite our fear, we knew we had no choice. We prepared for the ritual, gathering the necessary components, a mix of rare herbs, ancient symbols, and our blood, drawn to create a connection between our world and the astral plane. As midnight approached, we performed the ritual in Henry's dimly lit living room. The air grew thick with tension, the candles flickering ominously. We chanted the incantation, our voices blending into a single, resonant hum. A portal began to form in the center of the room, a swirling vortex of darkness and light. With a final, collective breath, we stepped through, leaving the safety of our world behind. The astral realm was a place of surreal beauty and unspeakable horrors. Shifting landscapes of vibrant colors and shadowy figures surrounded us, the air heavy with an otherworldly energy. We felt disoriented, our senses overwhelmed by the strangeness of it all. "Stay close," Henry warned. "We need to find the anchor and destroy it." As we ventured deeper into the astral realm, we encountered nightmarish visions, twisted reflections of our fears and regrets. The ground beneath us shifted, and time seemed to lose all meaning. It was a place where reality itself was malleable, and the witch's presence was palpable. After what felt like hours, we found it, a dark, pulsing orb, floating in a void. It radiated a malevolent energy that made our skin crawl. Alara's voice echoed around us, filled with rage and desperation. "You cannot destroy me," she screamed. "I am eternal." Henry stepped forward, clutching a talisman he had crafted for this purpose. "We can and we will," he said, his voice steady. He began to chant, the talisman glowing with a brilliant light. Alara's form appeared, twisted and furious, her eyes burning with hatred. "You will all die here," she hissed, launching herself at Henry. We fought back with everything we had, the talisman's light pushing against the darkness. The battle was fierce, the witch's power overwhelming, but our determination was stronger. With a final, desperate cry, Henry thrust the talisman into the orb. A blinding light engulfed us, and Alara's screams filled the void. Her form disintegrated, the orb shattering into nothingness. The astral realm trembled, and we were pulled back through the portal, crashing into Henry's living room. We lay on the floor, gasping for breath, our bodies and minds exhausted. The portal closed, and the oppressive energy lifted. It was over. Truly over this time. The marks on our wrists had vanished completely, and the lingering sense of dread was gone. We had faced the darkness and emerged victorious. But we knew the cost had been high. Henry, our guide and protector, had sacrificed himself to ensure Alara's destruction. His lifeless body lay beside us, a silent testament to his bravery. We buried Henry in the forest he had spent so much of his life protecting, a simple grave marked with a stone. As we stood there, the forest seemed to breathe easier, the oppressive weight lifted. Life slowly returned to normal, but we would never forget the horrors we had faced. The witch's curse had left its mark on us, a reminder that even the darkest evils could be overcome with courage and determination. And somewhere, deep in the recesses of our minds, we knew that while Alara was gone, the fight against darkness was never truly over. We would remain vigilant, always ready to face whatever horrors the world might throw at us. The forest, once a place of terror, now stood as a testament to our resilience. The stone circle was gone, the church reclaimed by nature. And we, forever changed, carried the memory of our battle as a reminder that even in the face of unimaginable evil, we had stood strong and emerged victorious.